Well, hey there, Beyonders. Welcome back to our series where we are exploring body and brain based strategies for healing the nervous system and resolving trauma. Now, if you've been following this series, we really started from the place of breath work, and more recently, we've been incorporating some body based practices. And now we're going to start to turn our attention to movement based practices, which actually we're going to use in combination with breath and with the body. But by bringing in some movement, we're going to be able to tap in to the nervous system in some different ways and support ourselves. So today's conversation is really just going to be about grounding into this idea of movement, why it's helpful, how it impacts different parts of the brain, just giving you a nice foundation and of understanding and some just little teeny tips for how to begin this. And then as the series continues, we'll get into some more specific movement-based strategies. Okay. So, what we're working with when we start to incorporate movement is becoming more connected into the body. The more attuned to our body we are, the more connected with the body we are, the better able we're going to be to regulate and ground and stay in nervous system regulation. All right, so we want to do things like reduce the stress response, the amygdala activation. We want to strengthen memory and the cortical areas of the brain. Okay, and so there are some very common movement practices like yoga and tai chi and qigong, and just generally exercise, movement, dance, walking, martial arts. But I don't want you to get too hung up on like, oh, I need to go out and like start a yoga practice. No, we can do really simple, really straightforward practices that don't require you go like be in a class or do anything extra special. So we're just going to think about simple ways of adding movement into any of our kind of grounding practices that we might be using. Okay. These movement practices are also really helpful if you struggle with attention, okay, because just a little bit of movement really helps bring in some focus and some grounding rather than if we're just kind of sitting still. So just keep that in mind as that being a way of self-resourcing if you struggle with some attention. So, one of the things we know from Peter Levine is this idea that unresolved trauma energy gets stuck in the body. And so the nervous system ultimately becomes disrupted. And so that trapped energy just kind of sits there and stews and stirs things up and causes reactivity and dysregulation. And so movement can help you become more connected into the body. And therefore, it's like creating little openings, little escape routes, if you will, for that trauma to get out of your system and out of your body. Okay. So, one of the things that we know about movement based techniques is that they're going to help support the brain in 7 key ways. So, one of the first things that's going to be supported is your fear center, the amygdala. So, movement based strategies are going to help you decrease activation of the fear center. And of course, that ends up leading to a reduction in reactivity and when those trauma triggers arise. So, your stress response, your sympathetic nervous system is all going to lead to a decrease in arousal and reactivity and hypervigilance, that sense of just being on guard all the time. We also see the stress response change. So it's related to the amygdala deactivation, but we know that we get less of the wear and tear on the body because of a dysregulated stress response system. So the more that we can navigate that, get the adrenos, in line and all of that good stuff, we have less of a stress response. When it comes to the interoception center, okay, remember that's our ability to kind of tune in and notice. The part of the brain that is responsible for that is the insula. All right, so we start to have more normalized insula activation. So when we are experiencing PTSD, the insula is often dysregulated. And when that's overreactive, we end up, or overactivated, if you will, we end up with emotional reactivity, outburst really quick, go to 0 to 60 real fast, okay? And then when it's underactivated, that's where we get a lot of that dissociation and numbing out. Okay. So the more regulated the insula is, we have more interoception, we can slow down, less reactivity, fewer emotional outbursts, and fewer dissociative symptoms. All right. The fourth area is the memory center. That's our hippocampus. So, increased activation of the memory center of the brain. And that activation helps remind you that you are safe. You are here. You are now. The hippocampus has everything to do with time and space and also data collection. It tells us when we are and where we are. And so, if the hippocampus is going offline because we're in constant states of dysregulation, we have less of a sense of feeling safe, grounded in the present. And so the more movement-based practices we use and techniques can really help to bolster the hippocampus because it increases the volume of the hippocampus. All right, the fifth area is the thinking center, our prefrontal cortex. So, increased prefrontal cortex activation leads to improved attention, problem solving, decision making. The stronger our prefrontal cortex, then we're able to have more mindfulness when we are having a stressful situation or a triggering situation. So, we are able to better evaluate, reframe, keep perspective rather than dropping into those old, unhealthy patterns of thought. Number 6 is the self-regulation center. So this is the cingulate cortex. So that when we have an increased activation leads to better thought and emotion regulation and conflict monitoring. Okay, so we're able to more adaptively and appropriately respond to triggering in those moments. And finally, connectivity. Movement-based exercises really help improve connectivity between all of these parts of the brain. You start to work as one great, wonderful, operating system rather than these parts feeling so separate and disconnected. And so that leads to better brain integration and functioning. Okay. All right. So again, we want to really think about movement as helping you to strengthen two things: interoception, your ability to feel inside, and proprioception, which is your ability to sense your body position and movement and balance. And all of that helps activate those brain areas that tend to be dysregulated after trauma. Okay. So I'm going to give you just some simple little teeny tools today again, and then next time we'll get into more layered and more deeply, just more expansive tools. So one simple thing, like any of the breathwork tools that I've shared with you, if you go back to any of those videos, you can use that breathwork, but then incorporate some movement. So you could lift your arms while you're doing the inhales and lowering your arms while you're doing the exhales. You can make circles with your arms or your hips, okay? You can use more body awareness techniques. So you can think more about as you're, kind of breathing, feeling specific sensations, like put a lot of focus on your legs or lift a leg while you breathe in and then lift a leg, while you breathe out. Paying attention to your lungs and really visualizing and feeling, the inhale and the exhale. Top-down practices with movement, so like EMDR and EFT, now those are two practices that you really have to make sure you have a really trauma-informed professional to help you use those tools. They're not always applicable for dealing with CPTSD. They're much more helpful for dealing with singular events, okay? But like walking while you're, processing or breathing, movement, those kinds of things. All right. So again, these are just some simple things. I think the easiest thing to probably try on is just using a little bit of movement when you're doing a breathing practice, raising the arms, lowering the arms, that kind of a thing. And so I look forward to kind of, building this out and exploring, some of these more specific movement-based practices with you, but I wanted to just give you a good foundation and a sense of where we're heading and why movement can be such a powerful resource and tool for helping us heal our nervous system and stay regulated. So as always, if you have any questions, comments, ahas, share them with me. And until next time, take good care of you.